the man who changed your healthcare system forever is now pushing to change your neighborhood. That is, if Uncle Sam feels it is not inclusive enough. Welcome to the Kelly File, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly. The Obama administration calls it a plan to diversify neighborhoods and promote fair housing choice. Critics say this is the most radical, politically explosive change President Obama has attempted in his 6+ years in office, calling it social engineering of the worst kind. The feds now want to take billions in housing grant money and condition it on communities proving that they are sufficiently inclusive and diverse. They want to look around the area you live and decide if your town is diverse enough. If not, the feds will order low-income housing, or else much of your federal funding for your town will dry up. Experts say this is more than an attempt to change the way America's neighborhoods look. It may also be an attempt to change the way they vote. Joining us now, nationally syndicated radio host Richard Fowler and Fox News contributor and former chief presidential speechwriter to George W. Bush, Mark Thiessen. We begin tonight with Mark. And so, Mark, this is being described as something that President Obama has had in the works for years, but has only now found the guts to actually put out there as a housing and urban development proposed final rule because his term is almost done, and this is the time to do it. The last thing on the list, change the neighborhoods.
Absolutely. Look, this is what happens when you take a community organizer and put him in the White House. He wants to organize your community from Washington, D.C. I mean, this is an insidious idea. What they are trying to do is engage in social engineering of local communities from Washington, D.C. They're going to take data, collect data on the racial makeup, social makeup, economic makeup of communities, and then either bribe or blackmail them into changing their zoning policies. I mean, this is a fundamental assault on freedom, on local government, on the principles that this country was built on.
They don't want, quote, unequal neighborhoods. Unequal neighborhoods. They think too many communities are too white, too privileged, with too big McMansions, too many big McMansions. And they want to diversify the communities, whether the communities want it or not.
Well, you know, the way to diversify communities, we believe in diversifying communities, too, as conservatives. The way you do that is through economic opportunity. The way you do that is you create opportunities for people at the bottom of the economic ladder to afford housing in these communities. It's not by building more affordable housing in affluent communities. It's by helping more Americans afford housing in affluent communities. And right now, the problem is that people at the bottom in the Obama economy can't get ahead. The reality is that
But what they're saying is that the way you live, what your town looks like, the racial makeup of it, the opportunity that is there has a real effect on families. And that they're saying too often families of color live in downtrodden, socio-economically depressed cities, whereas the whites live in these affluent suburbs around those cities, and that it's having a real negative effect on the families of color. And much in the same way affirmative action is meant to lift up those families of color by giving them more of a running start than starting from stop. This is supposed to do the same in a neighborhood.
Yeah, but the problem isn't the affluent communities, it's the downtrodden communities and the policies that have created those downtrodden communities. I mean, we've talked a lot on this show about Baltimore, right? And the reality is that people who are living in depressed areas of Baltimore, it's not because they're not living in affluent communities of Baltimore because there's racism in the zoning boards. They're living there because they don't have opportunity. They don't have jobs. They don't have hope. They're stuck in failing public schools. In Baltimore, African-American young men have a 37% unemployment rate. You're not going to move into an affluent neighborhood if you don't have a job or if you don't have an education. So the problem is not that these communities are keeping people out, is that our system is keeping these people down by not giving them jobs and opportunity.
What is going to happen? I mean, if this rule passes, they go in, they take a look at how your community looks. How white is it? How diversified is it? How rich is it? And if it doesn't meet with Uncle Sam's approval, then they can come in and it's low-income housing. Which is controversial because sometimes that can lower the housing values in a community that they weren't anticipating it. And what else? What would it look like?
It's not going to happen, I think, because there's going to be a massive revolt in this country against this. I mean, this is just such an assault on what we stand for as a country. To have Washington, D.C. coming into local communities, zoning and housing, those are local decisions that local communities make. It's not the job of the Department of Housing and Urban Development to micromanage thousands and thousands of municipalities and say there needs to be affordable housing here, needs to be affordable housing there.
It looks like they're going to try to push this through as a rule. And the question I have for you is, how does this play in 2016 politics?
It's going to be very important in 2016 politics for a couple of reasons. Number one, because the person who's implementing this, Julian Castro, the HUD secretary, is on everybody's short list to be Hillary Clinton's vice presidential nominee. If he gets tapped to be Hillary's running mate, this is going to be a very, very central issue. And secondly, because right now what they're going to do if this rule goes through and if it's not blocked by Congress, they're going to start collecting the data first before they can implement it. It's not going to get implemented under Barack Obama. The next president is going to implement it. So this is a major issue. Is Hillary Clinton going to re-engineer your community if she is elected president along with Julian Castro?
And she's going to say the Republicans are against communities of color. She's going to say that
that's exactly what they're going to try and say.
Those folks who pursued white flight want it to stay that way, and they don't want people of color moving in next door to them. And that's racist and discriminatory.
That's a very important point you make, and this is why Republicans have to be very careful how they handle this, because they want to portray Republicans as the party of the rich who want to protect the white suburbs against people of color and poverty coming into their neighborhoods. We need to make clear that our principle is every American of every race, creed, and color should be able to live wherever they want, but we need to create opportunities so they can afford to live wherever they want.
This is a fascinating issue, and it's very interesting that this is apparently one of President Obama's prize issues, and he saved it till now. Thanks, Mark. Richard Fowler is with us as well. Richard, your thoughts on whether, first of all, this is an attempt in any way to manipulate the way cities vote, the voting makeup?
I don't think that's the case at all here. I think what this president is trying to do is trying to really, truly create opportunity for all. Now, let's talk about the facts. The fact number one is there's more Caucasians on Section 8 housing than African Americans or Latinos, right? So we're talking about how we create.
The proponents of the rule are just trying to help families of color. I mean, it's not.
I think they're trying to help all families, not just families of color. I think if you take it
economically situated families, but they're focused on helping communities of color, which is a good thing. But they're open about that's who they're trying to help.
Well, here's the thing. When you have more diverse communities, like right here in our nation's capital, where you have Caucasian families living next to African-American families, living next to Latino families, living next to poor families and rich families, what you have is you have a more diversity, one, in ideals, but you also create better working places and better living situations for our young people, right? As young people begin to grow up, they get to understand cultural diversity, and that makes them more economic, that makes them better fit for the 21st century economy.
That's not controversial. What's controversial is government-designed equal neighborhoods. They're talking about unequal, uninclusive neighborhoods.
This is not the first time we've seen the federal government take steps in this direction. The other one that comes to mind is Brown versus the Board of Education, when the government said segregation in schools and segregation is not a good idea, and we have to do everything in our power to break that down. And then breaking that down is what's made America a better place today, and I would argue it's why we have an African-American president.
Okay, so your position is that even though any African-American can move into any community, I mean, really what stops you from moving into a community is money, generally, right? I mean, I didn't grow up in a fancy neighborhood. I wanted to be in one, but we couldn't afford it. And then, when I got to be an adult, I made more money, and now I live in a nice neighborhood. It's all right. It's a nice home, the neighborhood. Anyway, the point is, that's the way it was usually done. It's not like you must diversify because Uncle Sam feels it's too white or it's too rich.
So this is where I agree with Mark on one thing. I think the best way to fix this is creating economic opportunity, and this is a way to do that. Now, the states and the localities, the municipalities have the ability to reject this money, and we've seen this happen in the past.
They
when the federal government,
they take the federal money to help fight blight.
Well, I'll give you
blight.
I'll give you a great example, Megan. When we passed the highway bill in this country for the first time, a lot of states decided not to take the money because they didn't want to raise the age for smoking, right? And they took it at their own peril and at their own risk or reward. But the state has the ability to choose or not to choose to take the money. So if you don't want the federal government controlling how your neighborhood's diversity makeup is, then don't take the money. Don't complain. Don't take the money.
If you're so rich, don't take the money.
And I'm pretty sure a lot of municipalities won't take the money. Yeah. I can name a couple suburbs that probably be like, we don't even want it. We just want to stay, the way we are. White picket fences.
Look, this is what happens when you take a community organizer and put him in the White House.